afternoon if you're on the East Coast, and I guess it's high noon there in the central part of the U.S. It is right up at 10 o'clock Pacific time where I am, and people are still flooding in, literally about 10 or more every second. And so we're going to let them continue to flood in, but I'm going to respect your time. Those of you that were here early, thank you. I appreciate you guys being ready to go. We have a special guest today, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm excited to introduce him in just a minute. But while people are still signing in, I'll just give you the lay of the land of a couple things. This call is going to be about an hour and 10 minutes. And in this hour and 10 minutes, I'm going to, like I said, let you hear from a very special guest who really, we started our connection in a webinar just like this. And he's going to share with you the tremendous results he's had over the last 3 months. And let me tell you, they are incredible. I'll save that so he can share it. And I want to, today, I'm going to give you a high level view of a few things. One is why right now is the best time to be in the insurance business, to be doing what we're doing. I'm going to give you 5 reasons that I think will make a lot of sense as we go through them. The others, I'm going to give you some very tangible tools, things that you can use today coming from this webinar with your clients. And so I want this to be a very practical time, something that you feel was a great investment of an hour of your time. And the other thing I want to start with is something that is not only required, but in my opinion, absolutely critical to what we do. And it is this: compliance. I think compliance, let me first, I'll tell you, I'll do this first. Let me get this out of the way. I shouldn't say it that way. But here's the legalese. I'll just read this, but then I'll tell you what I think compliance really is. So this is for agent use only. Obviously, this isn't for use for the general public. Remember to consider your client's individual circumstances and objectives when discussing their specific situation. This presentation is not endorsed or approved by the Social Security Office or any other government agency. Obviously, it's not. All examples demonstrated are hypothetical. They're provided for illustrative purposes only and are not intended to reflect actual or future results that would be realized in a life insurance policy, and is provided to show how certain policy features work. Testimonials were not paid for, and actual experience will vary. So that's the legal compliance. And yet all of that is critical. It's important that we adhere to that. But here's compliance to me. If I can get this screen to move forward. Here is compliance simplified. And I have said this, I think, every time I've spoken for the last 12 years. And compliance is simply this. And if we do this, folks, we will be a revered industry. And we should be a revered industry because what we do is critical for people. And it's simply this: do the right thing for every person, every time, based on their needs and not your pocketbook. If you do that, really, you will comply with all of virtually the compliance regulations that are out there, and you can hold your head high. Honestly, the agents that I've met, the tens of thousands of agents that I've met over the last decade plus, I would say the vast majority do this very thing. The very few don't. But it's my goal, like I say in the back of the book with my little bio, to be a very client-focused group of people who are always doing the right thing. So with that little piece kicking us off, I want to now bring in and introduce my guest, Joel. Joel is an agent from Nebraska. Good morning, Joel. I guess good afternoon there for you.
Yeah. Hi, Patrick.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm excited that you get the opportunity to share your story with hundreds and hundreds of people across the country that are joining us today, because I think it's a powerful story. And it really, matter of fact, I probably wouldn't even need to do any of my PowerPoint or my presentation because you encapsulate everything I'm about to share. So first of all, Joel, why don't you share with the group a little bit about, your experience, how long you've been in the business, and how you got connected with Simplicity?
Sure. I've been in the industry for about 13 and a half years. I started while I was in college as an intern for one of the large career agencies, stuck around there for about 3.5 years. And then for the last 10, I have been an independent financial advisor. I found Simplicity I guess I started, like a lot of the offices in Simplicity, with one that was picked up and purchased. So I was with, I guess it was PFG, and now it's Simplicity Glendale. So that's how I was able to find them. But yet the experience in working with Simplicity has just been fantastic for the time that I've been around.
And so really you sort of took a different level of engagement here just a few months ago. And that's really the story that I want them to hear. Tell them how you connected with this webinar yourself and how that all came about.
Yeah. So obviously, as soon as the pandemic hit, it was fairly obvious that our game was going to change as advisors. I'm one that for the last 5 years or so, I've been delivering in-person classes at libraries and colleges and things like that. So I've acquired quite a few people that have heard me speak. But then I knew with schools closing and libraries closing that the world was not going to be the same for the foreseeable future for my particular marketing method. So I actually started by reaching out to people that I trust. So Nathan Jacobson, head of life at Simplicity here, I started barking up his tree in March, just saying, hey, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? What's the new way going to be? And that was when Nathan connected me with Patrick. So that was how I found the program, then was able to view the webinar. But I kind of had the ball rolling even before the webinar, just by connecting with Nathan and with you, Patrick.
That's great. And folks, I want to give I want to play almost a little Jeopardy here. I'm going to give you the end of the story or the answer first, and then I'm going to let Joel backfill it because it's pretty powerful. The story that Joel's about to share with you, and it's really a very simple story, as everything should be. Everything that I've done ever effectively has always been simple. Now it's work, but it's simple. It doesn't need to be complicated. And so the end of the story is, and I just reconfirmed this with Joel this morning, using exactly what we're going to show you today in this webinar. In the last 3 months, since April 17th, so actually just under 3 months, Joel has done $230,000 of paid commission, not premium, but commission. And so, Joel, why don't you share that story with them and how you were able to do that? Because clearly you've been a very successful agent, but that's your best quarter ever, isn't it?
Yeah, it is definitely.
In the middle of a pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really taken me to new heights. So like I said, it started, having conversation with Nathan and with Patrick in late March. And then throughout the course of early April, Patrick, you helped me write some letters. And then of course I needed to get materials compliance approved by my broker dealer and RIA. But on April 17th and 18th, I mailed out 385 envelopes to people who are either current clients or had seen me or heard me speak in the past at one of my live events where I was able to gather names and addresses and things like that. So 385 packages went out. In there, I basically just said, hey, I'm thinking of you during the pandemic. I know that entertainment isn't quite the same as it used to, so I wanted to provide you with a book for some quiet reading time, and then also a DVD for your viewing pleasure, whenever you want to plug that in on a Friday or Saturday night. And I just asked that they report back to me with what they thought of the book and that sort of thing. So a book and a DVD and a letter in there. And then, of course, I had plastered my name and business and that sort of thing on the book. And then in the 2.5 months or so since then, I've had a whole bunch of people call in, either confirming the fact that they already own an indexed annuity or an indexed life insurance policy with me, or saying, hey, I didn't even know that this was an option. Let's talk more about this. So I've had a lot of new open cases. I've had a lot of, just confirmations of happy clients. And ultimately, like you said, between annuity and life insurance business, it has generated me about $230,000 in commissions in the last 2.5 months since then. Would have been a little bit more. I had one life insurance case declined. But nonetheless, I also know that number is still growing.
You
I
shared a
have.
specific story, and maybe that's where you're going to, that I just loved. Two of them actually recently that just happened. Why don't you sort of share those two little stories?
Yeah, so I had a meeting this morning that just locked me down some new business. We don't know exactly what we're doing, but I will have a new client as a result of it. And it starts with kind of a sad situation. One of my current clients here in Lincoln, her father passed away during the pandemic early on. So her sister drove down from Milwaukee for the funeral and was sitting, in her sister's living room, and saw Patrick's book that I had mailed sitting on the coffee table. She picked it up, looked at it, asked some questions, and then actually took it and read it. And here I was getting contacted not only by my client, but also my client's sister,
Hmm.
saying, "Hey, we're settling our father's estate." And he was a successful practicing doctor for many years. So it was a fairly sizable estate. And now they're both asking me to help with this inheritance. So not only do I have a happy client, current client with new business, but also
Hmm.
their sister, just via the power of the book sitting on the coffee table.
That's very interesting. I have a story similar to that myself, where the book was just sitting on a coffee table and someone picked it up and it was $1 million case. Another thing you mentioned too, you got an email over the weekend from someone that you had spoken to how long ago?
It was 2016. We actually checked our records because the name wasn't even ringing a bell. So I hadn't contacted this person since 2016, but they took one of my 6-hour in-person courses, had really enjoyed the material, but just it wasn't the right timing for them, no pressing needs to take action. But because we sent out the package and they got the book, they emailed here over the long holiday weekend and said, "Hey, we'd like to reconnect. We really enjoyed your material back in the day. Obviously, you care a lot by sending out this package to us. We'd love to meet with you sometime next week to discuss our own personal finances." So that was another real cool one where the book is still working even 2.5 months later.
Fantastic. Let me ask you, Joe. So you jumped in with both feet, and we'll sort of wrap up with this. That what you saw, what I'm going to share today with these folks. You said, "Hey, I'm not doing 100. I'm buying 400." You sent out 385 to
Yep.
generate 230,000 in commission. And you may have to rough guess this.
Yep.
How many cases, meaning how many individual books, did that represent of that 385?
Um, Boy, I hadn't thought about that. I would guess probably about a dozen cases.
Okay.
I think that would represent.
Okay. So about 12 of the 385 books were positive, but it generated a return. Now, because you sent a book to 385 people and a DVD, I remember you telling me before you invested about $11,000 in this program, but obviously the return on that has been, a lot, 2,000% or whatever it's been
Yeah.
in your total investment. So, but it shows that you don't need a lot of those to come to a sale to really make it worth especially your time. I guess that'd be one last question that we didn't talk about at all, but how has the book affected the use of your time versus how you did it before? Has there been any change there?
Yeah, it's been a lot more efficient, especially when people reach out to us saying, "Hey, we read the book. We watched the DVD. We got your letter." Those people are very, very interested. I mean, you can't get a much warmer lead or much warmer interest than something like that. And it's the analogy that you may use later today, because I've heard you use it a couple times, Patrick. But you're fishing with a different net, right? The holes are the right size where you let the cold leads swim through, but yet the warm ones get caught in the net, and that's exactly what the book does.
Well, like it said up front, no testimonials were paid. This is Joel out of the kindness of his own heart sharing his experience. But if I could pay you, I would, because truly what you have done is really supporting what I'm going to share with these folks today. So with that, we're going to go ahead and transition, but I just felt it was so important for everybody on this call to hear what is happening in one agent's life by taking action during a time when people are struggling in their business. They're struggling to get in front of clients, and yet you had your best quarter ever. at maybe the hardest time to connect with people. So congratulations, Joel. Thanks for your partnership, and I'm excited for what's yet to come.
Yeah, you're welcome, Patrick. Thank you for everything.
You're very welcome. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did interviewing him, because he's a very special agent. But what makes him special, many things, but one of those things is he took action. He did something. He didn't just hear great stuff or, a new idea and then say, hey, great, I'll file it away. He took action, and the action gave him the best quarter ever during the pandemic. So let's talk about now why I think right now, if I can get my slideshow, it's not cooperating today. The 5 reasons why right now is the best time to be in the life insurance business. The first thing, and many of you have heard me talk about this before, but I need to revisit it because it's so significant right now. And I have some slides even from this morning, and that's the national debt. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through these 5 reasons, then I'm going to go through the tax-free retirement presentation, how you can use it with your clients. Then I'm going to give you some marketing ideas and some actual word track, a script to use to be able to connect with individuals either over the phone or in person. And then, like I said, I promise there's no obligation to this at all. At the end, I'm going to give you a promo code that you'll be able to use forever that will give you a discount, a significant discount on the books. So hang tight till the end, and we'll get that to everybody who's participating today. So the first reason that I think it's the best time to be in our business is the national debt. You say, what? The national debt, how does that play in? Well, let's take a look. First of all, back in February, on February 9th of this year, our national debt stood at $23 trillion. Now, right after I published the book, right as I started my speaking to agents, which is around March of 2008, this is probably the first slide number that I used, that number was only 9.3 trillion. So if you think about this, folks, we had a $14 trillion official increase in 12 years. It's 149%. Folks, in 2008, our country was 232 years old. And it took us 232 years to accumulate 9.3 trillion. And in 12 years, it took us just that length of time to more than double, significantly more than double. Now, the problem is the real national debt, and I'll explain the difference for those of you that are new to all of this, because if you read any of my books, you'll understand the difference. But the real national debt is 121 or 122 trillion. It's actually now somewhere up in the 140 trillion by one website. And the difference is simply this, that any other state government and any other corporation, if they were reporting their balance sheet, their debt, their liabilities, they'd have to report $122 trillion in debt, not just the 23 trillion back in February that the US government. And the reason for that is the US government's allowed to use a different accounting practice than any other entity, either state or corporation. They only have to report the debt that they have spent so far above what they have, not, it's sort of like a combination or culmination and a sum, if you will, of all of the annual deficits. They don't have to report all of their future liabilities, which every other organization has to. So what it really means is if we didn't commit to anything new, and you'll see that's not happening, just to fulfill our current obligations, that debt, that liability would be about $122 trillion. Each taxpayer's share based on that number, and it's much larger now, is $800,000, $370,000, this is back in February, per man, woman, baby in the US. But let's look, that was on February 9th. Look what happens then. 6 weeks later, we added another trillion to 24.2, a $14.8 trillion increase, increased another 10%. 3 weeks after that, another trillion to 25.1. Actually, it was 24.1 previously, 25.1. Fifth went from 14.8 trillion to 15.8 trillion, 168%. So February was 148%, 49% increase. That 6 weeks later was 158% increase. 3 weeks after that, 168% increase. And then today, 7 weeks after that, another 1.2 trillion. We're at 26.3 trillion in official debt, not real debt. Real debt somewhere about 144 trillion. $17 trillion official increase over the last 12 years. Oops, that should say 168, not 158. I forgot to change that, it appears. But let's talk about what's driving this and where we've yet to go. Obviously, we all know about the CARES Act. The numbers, though, if you haven't seen them, now this is 1.8, we know it's 2.2, but the 2009 stimulus package was only 831 billion. It's 2.5 times or 2.5 times larger than that. Compared to our 2019 numbers, all of our total federal revenue in 2019 was 3.5 trillion. And yet, the one for just the COVID phase 1 stimulus was 2.2. Our entire federal spending for 2019 as a country was 4.4 trillion. And we've now far eclipsed that for the COVID spending just in the last few months, just for COVID, not to mention everything else we still have to pay for. Matter of fact, right after this came out, Larry Kudlow came on and said, really the first, this is package 1, this is March 24th, if you look at the date of this, that the stimulus package to exceed $6 trillion because $2 trillion was given away to individuals, but $6 trillion was given as, quote, loans. Well, a lot of those loans are forgivable. Some of those companies will go bankrupt. They won't. So really, we're looking at a $6 trillion that we haven't accounted for debt. Now, this is very interesting. This is I think, a very scary article. Again, back in April 21st, this was right after the very first stimulus package was agreed upon. It says our debt will surge past wartime record. Matter of fact, I saw this reported by Mitch McConnell yesterday saying for the first time since World War II, our debt is now as large as our entire economy. But it says our well, let me just show you the thing. The U.S. budget deficit may quadruple this year to almost 4 trillion. And I think it's going to go far past that based on what I'm going to show you in a second. Projections from the committee, I think that's all we need to see right there. But if you look at this graph, and here's the whole piece of the graph, this is stunning. And again, remember, this was only after the first stimulus package, not 2.0, 3.0, 3.5, or what's coming up as 4.0. It shows that this is a measurement of our federal debt held as a percent of our entire economy or our GDP. And back in World War II, 1944, 1945, it peaked at 106% of our debt to economy, debt to GDP. You can see most of our lifetime, well, all of our lifetimes, it's really hovered around in the 20s, 30s, and maybe a bop up into the 40s. Until 2008 and 2009, it started to climb up. But even then, if you see that, it was still just barely above 40. Well, right now, because of the coronavirus pandemic, our debt to GDP after the first stimulus package was going to go to 107%, it was projected. That's before some of these other things. That's before this. This is from today's news, July 7th. The White House, and it looks like this is where they're headed. Now, we don't know what the next stimulus will look like. The White House wants the stimulus by August recess with a $1 trillion cap. Folks, there's another trillion. We might go to an $18 trillion increase, which would be a 200% increase in our debt in the last 12 years. So why is that important? Why is that a positive? Well, let's look at a couple other things. Here's why it's a negative for our country, but it's a positive for us in our industry if we get the story out. And I want to help you get the story out. Matter of fact, in the new version of Tax-Free Retirement, the 10th anniversary edition, my first chapter focuses on this because I think it's so critical. But if you look, this is the top marginal tax bracket over our last 100 years. And I think if you look at the similarities between the debt to GDP, it's a bit scary. Let's take a look. Let me see. I can get a little fancy pointer going here. So the lowest tax bracket, ironically, in the last 100 years was the years prior and preceding the Great Depression, when unemployment was at 3.2%. That's interesting. Where were we? 3.5%. After that, because of the debt to GDP issue and because of World War II, it spiked. In 1944 and 1945, the top marginal tax bracket was 94%. That means that people in that tax bracket got to keep 6 cents of every dollar they made. And it stayed that way above 90% for 16 out of those 30 years. But since then, since the mid 60s, our tax rates have been coming down and down and down. Now, let me ask you, is that not a tremendous disconnect to you? It is to me. How could our debt be at a percentage that's as high as this? How could our debt be at the lowest or at the highest growing pace it's ever been? We're doubling this thing every few years. And yet our top marginal tax bracket be at the lowest it's been in the last 100 years. That doesn't make sense to me. I wish it could stay there. And I'm not telling you where it's going. You do your own math. But I think when you see what I'm about to show you, we have to ask, is it sustainable? And here's why this is a positive for us. Because if we're talking about life insurance, if we can help people, if we believe, and if they believe that tax rates are going to be higher in the future, and I don't think we need to beat that drum anymore of where we think it's going or where it has to go. And if we can help people pay their taxes today at one of the lowest rates in the last 100 years, let that money grow tax-free and then be able to access it tax-free, we have done our community, our sphere of influence, a tremendous service. We have saved people tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxes. And right now, with what's pending, we have the opportunity to help them get out of the tax wash at the lowest rates they've had in the last 100 years and to do something where they won't be affected if tax rates do go up. To me, that's one of the most significant reasons of why we're in this business and what we can help them do. So there's reason one. Reason two is current market levels. Now, this may seem like an odd one at first, but let me explain why the current market levels are so significant. This is, I pulled this 15 minutes before we went live today. I updated it with today's numbers. Today, right before we jumped on this call, the S&P 500 sits at 3172. A year ago to the day, tomorrow, that the S&P 500 was at 2976. That means that the S&P 500 in the last 12 months has had a 6.58% growth with unemployment at the highest level since the Great Depression, which we'll look at in a minute. I mean, really, unemployment went a year ago. Unemployment was at less than 4% when the S&P 500 was at 2976. Today, it sits at 13.3. Many will argue it's higher than that. I think real unemployment hasn't really taken hold yet because people have kept employees on the payrolls because of the PPP. But you can start seeing people saying, like American Airlines, we're 8,000 flight attendants overstaffed. United saying they're 20,000 people, if I recall. So I think unemployment is not done yet. But even if it is, even if that's the number, 13.3, really, our market is up 6.5. Well, why is that important for us? Why it's important for us is, Matt, well, I was going to use a quote off a different book, but I'll just keep finishing the thought first, is if the market was still down here, people would not want to move that money. People do things backwards in the market. You know that, I know that. They hold when they should be selling and they sell when they should be holding or buying. And people don't want to sell at a huge loss, unfortunately. And so, but now because they've made back all or more of their money, they're ahead of where they were 12 months ago back here, that it's a great opportunity to ask them a question like, how much of the money that you lost, that your account went down during the March, decline, have you made back? And if they say most of it, then say really the more important question is, how much of that do you want to keep? Because I have a way that you can keep that and guarantee that you'll never lose and still participate in growth years. So here's the unemployment numbers. It's interesting. In 2019, we were 3.5%. You go back to the Great Depression, 1929, 3.2%. You can see what happened. And we were in the 20s not long ago. I think we possibly might get back there, but that's yet to be seen. We don't know. But folks, the market, people are open to protecting their money. And that question that I just shared with you, how much have you made back? But more importantly, how much do you want to keep, is a powerful way to get them interested. And they'll say, well, what do you mean? And then we can tell our story. Here's some other things going on. The big bankruptcies defined as $50 million companies or more, fastest pace since 2009. Here's the number of filings just in May of companies 50 million or greater. This is just an aside. This is an incredible graph. I think it describes what we're experiencing. I think it describes every bubble that I've experienced in my lifetime. The tech bubble, and I've experienced more of these, but more recent, the tech bubble and the credit crisis, the housing bubble. If you look at what this says, and this is from a study from Hofstra University, one of the professors there, he shows that here's how bubbles happen. Smart money is in early. Institutional investors come. There's a little dip with some profit taking. But then the public gets the attention, enthusiasm, greed, delusion. A new paradigm is new. This has never happened before. Think back of the tulip mania back in Holland. It was the same thing. This is a new economy. This is a new medium of money. And then what happens is reality sets in, and there's something that pops the bubble. But then after the bubble pop, people are like, nah, we're returning to normal. That was just a head fake. And as they return to normal, what happens is reality sets in. And I'll just I think we're seeing a bubble right now. We've seen enthusiasm of new traders coming into the marketplace. I can tell you, it feels a lot to me like 1999 and 2000, when these young kids were day trading stocks and making money hand over fist. And then greed sets in and delusion, and this is the way it's always going to be. But what happens is it returns to normal. And again, one thing I will tell you, I have no idea where the market is going, nor does anybody else. But it's possible that that we're right now in this return to normal, even exceeding in some ways, and like the NASDAQ is above its peak, but that at some point, people are going to expect real numbers, real projections out of companies. And right now, there's no forecast being given. They're just sort of sitting on the sidelines. So at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if we see fear return, capitulation return, and finally into despair, which we've seen out of the last number of bubbles. And if that happens, if we can help get people out of the stock market here, I can promise you this, you will be their hero forever, and they will thank you forever. So that's the second reason that right now I think is the best time, is that markets have returned to a spot where people are open to getting their money to safety because they've just experienced a decline, especially if you can show them a way that they can participate in some gains. The third reason is our current product offering. Now, what I mean by that is, I'll just go back through and I'll be brief on this, but the history of universal life insurance has been a little bit rocky. The original traditional UL started in the early 80s, and I entered the business in 1991. And in 1991, there were some ULs that you could offer at 13, 14%. The problem, because interest rates were ridiculously high. I mean, home mortgages were in the double digits in some cases. I mean, think about that today. And so the problem with that is the illustrations, especially as a new product, were given, and it looked like they were going to earn that each and every year for the rest of their lives. Well, we know what happened with interest rates. They started to decline, and many of those policies imploded. And they didn't have to. If agents would have returned and met with their clients and said, hey, here's what's happening. Or if even when they sold it in the first place said, this is if this continues, which is what we do today in our product, by the way. Well, we'll get to that in a minute, or a little bit later. But anyway, so it was a bad, and to agents' defense, that it was a new product. They may not have known what they didn't know at that point, and they didn't know that interest rates weren't going to continue. But so that really was a bad first start. Then in the early 2000s, the VUL comes into play. And why did it come into play? Well, the tech bubble and everything that was going on there, people wanted to participate in the market. If you couldn't give them some foot in the market, they just didn't want to play. It's, again, feels a little bit like today. in many cases. And so the insurance company said, hey, we can figure out a way to do that. And the VUL came to play right before the credit crisis. And so once again, many of those policies, I saw people illustrating 10% return on their VULs. It's like, no, don't do that. That is just an anomaly. It's a season we're in right now, but that's not sustainable. And again, in all of this, if we do the right thing for the client, if we're reasonable in what we show, then we're going to be safe. But so it had a first rough couple starts, but right now, folks, I think the third time's a charm. I think the product that we have, it learned its lessons from both of those first two generations. And I think, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, it's the best financial product in the market today for accumulation of cash, especially if you do it right. And that's what we're going to talk about. My whole goal is helping agents do it right. It really protects, obviously, if we're protected against loss, then we take both of those issues out, really, that were at play in the first two. And so one of the things that's in two of my books, it's called The Big Lie, in chapter 6 of The Retirement Miracle and chapter 6 of Stress Free Retirement, which is an annuity book. The Big Lie talks about the difference between average return and a real return. And so let me give you a highlight. And this is really where the power of the IUL, or fixed index annuity, comes into play. If you had an account, and again, this is what's talked about, this is the example given in the book, which really resonates with a lot of people. It really sort of opens their eyes. But if you had an account that lost 50% in year one and gained 50% in year two, what would your average, return be? Well, the average is 0, right? Minus 50 plus 50 is 0. 0 divided by 2 is 0. So mutual funds and other things could say our average return in the last 2 years has been 0. They could say that, making it seem like people haven't lost any money. Well, here's the reality. What's their actual return or their real return? Well, it's been negative 25%. Let's do the math. If at the beginning of year one, you had $1,000, you lose 50%, you go to 500, gain 50%, you go back to 750. That's a negative 25% return in 2 years. Now, I had one agent say, yeah, you're trying to trick us. You're doing the loss first. What if you do the loss second? Well, it's the same. $1,000 with a 50% return first goes to 1,500, 50% negative return second year goes, it's exactly the same result. So what's great about our product, folks, what makes this so powerful is anytime an average return has to factor in a negative number, even for 1 year, the average and the actual will never be the same. Do markets have negative years? Do mutual funds have negative years? Yes and yes. How many times will an IUL have a negative year? Never. Therefore, with the IUL, the average and the actual will always be the same. Think about the power of that. You have people in a product that are either going to make money each year or stay level. They will never lose a penny based on the market. And that is a powerful strategy and a powerful place where the only product that has any market-like returns, because none of the money is actually in the market, that the average and the actual will be the same number for them. Powerful, powerful, powerful stuff. So that's reason number 3. Reason number 4 is people still remember 2000 and 2008. What do I mean by that? It was called, if you look at this here, back in 2000, the S&P 500 hit about 1,500. It did it again right in 2007. And then the market cratered down to 752, I think is where it closed on March 9th. And it took this whole period of time all the way till 2013. So really, it wasn't a lost decade. It was a lost 13 years. It took 13 years to get back to even, where that money did nothing for those folks. And here's what I would ask you. People remember that. You could ask them, how much of the money that you lost in 2008 or 2009, 8 and 9, have you made back? Well, obviously all of it if they stay in the market. And again, how much of that would you like to keep? Same question you can ask with what happened in March. But here's the real question. With what's going on with unemployment, with what's going on with bankruptcies, with what's going on with taxes, with what's going on politically, not to mention, we don't know what's going to happen in November. That's going to throw its own monkey wrenches. And internationally with Hong Kong and China, could the lost decade become the lost 2 decades. And if we can help people not have to experience the last 2 decades by helping them get their money out of the market today, put it somewhere where they'll still get significant returns that are safe, that is a great position to be. And then lastly and quickly is interest rates. Why do I bring interest rates into? Well, right now, as you know, interest rates are virtually nothing. Our 10-year, which at the time of this was 0.55. I don't know where it is today, but probably like 0.6 or 0.7, 0.5% essentially for our 10-year bonds. CDs, you're lucky if you get above 1%. And in Germany, and there's been some talk about negative rates. I don't think we're going to try this out. It would be an experiment. It's not served other countries well. But right now, Germany is about a negative 0.5% on the 10-year bond. And so why do I bring that up? Why is that the fifth reason? Is because people don't have any alternative for returns that is safe money. I'm going to go back here. They don't have any option for any inflation beating opportunity for safe money. They really don't. Bonds are, there's some good returns in bonds right now, not government bonds necessarily, but corporate bonds. But right now, corporate bonds are a little risky. So these 5 reasons, folks, if you're new to this industry, or if you're a long tenured agent in this industry, I just want to let you know the future is more exciting than it's ever been to be in our business, because we uniquely have the opportunity to help people navigate what I believe is coming. I think a tsunami is bearing down on us with this debt issue, and the debt is going to drive taxes, and the taxes is going to drive all sorts of problems, and we can help people get out of that. So I hope that even though many of these things are negative, that if you share some of these things, which my book does, my book shares these tax-free retirement, and really all my books will share many aspects of this with the client. And one thing I say often when I speak live to a group in a piece, but I'll share it here, is the old analogy that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And I say, that's just not correct. You can actually absolutely make a horse drink. You just have to make them thirsty. And the reason that sometimes, and this isn't, it could be viewed as negative, but really it's reality. We're helping people see what may be coming in the future, this tsunami that's bearing down on them. And even though it's negative news, it's very positive if they can see that we're trying to help prevent them from this tsunami. And what we're essentially doing, folks, with all of these things is we're making the horse thirsty. Because if the horse is thirsty, the horse wants to drink. And if it's not thirsty, it doesn't. And a lot of times we try and present this incredible product to our clients without having them thirsty. So let's talk now about how you would explain it. And this is a very cursory level. I have training that goes much deeper than this, but I want to give you the simple slides. And these slides are similar to a slide presentation that I have built for agents to use with clients that we can talk about in a minute. But so let's just go through, and I'll talk to you as if I was talking to a client of mine and say, John, when you retire, all of your money is going to be in 2 pots of money. It's either going to be taxable or it's going to be tax-free. Now let's talk about each of those different pots. The first one, the taxable pot, has really 2 different types of income, 2 different types of taxation. The first is capital gains, which you're probably familiar with, and that is for earnings on things such as stocks, mutual funds, maybe the sale of a business or real estate. The other thing over here, the ordinary income tax, is something you're obviously very familiar with now if you earn a wage, because it's on wages and interest. Potentially, it could be on Social Security. We'll talk about that in a minute. But where most people's money sits in retirement are all these letters and number, what I like to call the alphabet soup of retirement. SEP, simple, 401k, 403b. All of these things fall into the heading of a tax qualified plan. Now, what a tax qualified plan allows individuals to do is put money away today that has not been taxed, but hold it till some future date. At what point when they take it out, that all of it is taxed at whatever tax rate is in place at that time. Both the contribution and the gain. And folks, I want to share, well, no, I don't have time to do that. I was going to share another analogy, but I'll save it for another time when we're together. So anyway, and it's at this point, I often like to ask John, so what do you think taxes are going to do in the future? Do you think they're going to be higher or lower than they are today? And generally speaking, they will say, almost always, they'll say, well, I think they're going to be higher. I don't ever indicate what I think they're doing because I don't know. I'll say, I would tend to agree with that based on what I'm reading as well. So let's take a look at the other type of pot of money. It's tax-free. Now, what falls into that, there are three possible places that I'm aware of that you can put money away and access it tax-free if you do it properly. The first is municipal bonds. The second is a Roth IRA or Roth 401k if you happen to have that at your work. And the third is certain types of life insurance if it's done properly. Now, John, I tend to cross off municipal bonds for everybody for a couple of reasons. Historically, they have not really returned much better than inflation. And so they're sort of been like sitting still with your money. But the other reason, and more so now than ever, is many municipalities are struggling. And there have been some recent bankruptcies. And so really there's risk involved. So to not beat inflation and to have that level of risk, to me, does not seem like a commensurate good deal. Now, so I tend to cross that off for everybody. The other option is a Roth IRA or Roth 401k. Now, a lot of people might not have a Roth 401k available to them at work, and so we'll just set that aside for now. But the Roth IRA is a great option if you are allowed to participate. But John, if you're a higher income earner, which you happen to be, then unfortunately the government in their great wisdom said you don't make enough money, or excuse me, you make too much money to be able to participate. So unfortunately you can't. So John, in your particular case, the only place that we're able to get money into this tax-free pot for retirement is life insurance, certain types of life insurance if we do it properly. Now, if the person was able to contribute to a Roth IRA, I would say something like, John, in your particular case, you have both the Roth IRA and life insurance, and they're both really good options. Now, John, there is a book. So there's two ways to do this. If like Joel had sent out a book and they had read Tax-Free Retirement, even if they hadn't read it, even if you gave it to them, you would reference that. If you haven't, if you're just talking to somebody in general and they know nothing about it, you'd say it a different way. So if you gave me a book, say, hey, John, remember that book I gave you, Tax-Free Retirement? Well, in there, this guy talks about this smart money order, this smart investment order. Now, there's another, if you hadn't given him a book, you could say, hey, a little while ago, I read this book and this guy talked about this thing called the smart investment order. And let me explain what that is. In either way, you're just introducing it so you can get their buy-in and say, what he was saying in that is if you have money to put away, he thinks this is the smartest order in which to do so. I want to make sure that you're on board with this as well, that it makes sense. And so the first thing he says, if you can get free money, that's better than tax-free money. Well, obviously free money isn't really an investment at all. We'll come back and talk about that in a minute. But I want to make sure that these other three make sense. If you could get a tax-free return on your money, is that better than just a tax-deferred return? Yes. Is a tax-deferred return better than a taxable? Yes. So this order would make sense to you. Well, yeah, it makes perfect sense. I agree. You want their buy-in. And again, I'm going through this very fast. I have a much deeper way that we can go through this and spend a lot of time on exactly what to say, how to say it, what they say, how to respond. But I want to give you, again, this is enough that you can use, but it's not all of the detail that's possible. So let's go back and say, John, let's go back and talk about free money. Where can you get free money? Well, there's two places I'm aware of that you can get free money. First is a gift or an inheritance, and there's not many people I know turning that down. The second is through a match that you might have available on your 401k. And John, if you have a matching provision in your 401k, I'm going to encourage you to take every penny of it because it's free money. It's like 100% return from day one. So take it. But here's what you need to realize is the day after or the minute after you contribute $1 above the match, you've gone from free money to tax deferred money, and you've skipped over number 2 altogether. And if number 2 we've said is better or more powerful strategy than number 3, Not sure we want to do that. So let's take a look at those two strategies in a little bit more detail. On the left is the tax deferred strategy, which could apply to any tax qualified plan, including an IRA. On the right is a tax-free strategy, which would apply to a Roth IRA, Roth 401k, or again, certain types of life insurance. Well, John, the money that you put in the tax qualified plan over here, the tax deferred plan, have you paid tax on that before it's gone in? And he'll know that, and he'll say, no, I haven't. You say, that's right. No tax was charged on the way in, but because of that, the way the rules are written is when you take it out, all of it, both contribution and gain, all of it's going to be taxed as ordinary income. Now, over on this side, the money that goes into these strategies, it is after tax money. So tax has been paid on the small portion on the contribution. But once it grows, because you've already paid tax on the money going in, you're able to access all of it, both the contribution and the gain, with zero federal tax, or state tax for that matter, if you do it properly. I should say zero income tax. So, John, the real question that you need to ask yourself is, would you rather pay tax on that, or would you rather pay tax on that? And that starts to open their eyes. And this is where I'm going to really be brief and go through how it works with life insurance, because we don't have enough time to go in detail, but like how you build it or what we're doing, but it's enough that you can use. So I'll say, John, let's take a look at how this would work if we utilized life insurance. So John, here you are putting money into what we're going to call a universal life policy. And what this box represents is the minimum amount. And by the way, folks, minimum in my book equals target. Anything less than that's not doing a service to the customer. That this box represents the minimum amount that my company, or not my company, the company we're going to write with, requires to be able to purchase the policy. Now, John, before the money gets there, the premium, a little bit comes out for fees and expenses like any other product typically has. And then from the money that's sitting in the policy, periodically, usually like once a month, the company will withdraw enough for the mortality cost, or the death, to pay the death benefit, to buy the life insurance rather, the cost of the life insurance. But most of the money actually, when we look at the illustration, is sitting right here. But there's another box, and it's a much bigger box. And what this box represents, John, is the maximum that the IRS allows you to put into this policy. And John, in my experience, anytime the IRS limits what you can put into something, it's usually because it's really a good deal. Now, what we do next is we'll get him, and again, not today, we don't have time to do this, but you ask a question that will get them to want to know what these two boxes represent numbers-wise. We then tell them that the reason there's no numbers by them is because it's totally dependent on the proper amount of insurance. We then spend about 10 seconds, literally 10 seconds, keeping the story going, of doing a quick financial need, I wouldn't say even analysis, but just a thumbnail sketch to get an amount of insurance that they feel is proper for them. And in that short little transition, you then turn to your computer, run an illustration. All of that takes about 90 seconds to 2 minutes if you do it properly and have it set up properly, which again, I can show you how to do. But then you come to the illustration. And again, this is small print, but I'll read it off to you. So the key here is you say, John, let's take a look at how this policy would perform if you put the most in that the IRS allowed you to put in. And if we did this, and I'm looking at what I think is one of the best products in the market today, and that's the Allianz Life Pro Plus Advantage policy. And if John's a 35-year-old male making about $150,000 a year, so he's a higher paying professional, or maybe even that's their household income, but we're still using it in this situation. And he needs about $1 million of life insurance, and we do the maximum. Here's what it looks like. Now, what it would show is if he put in $28,000 a year, which I think, if I remember, it's about $2,300 and change a month. So I say, John, if you put in the $2,300 a month every month for the next 31 years, go to the next slide here. You would have put in $875,000 over 31 years. So John, what you need to understand is that $875,000 over 31 years, based on our hypothetical example, and folks, you'll see in a second, I always try and be relatively conservative. I dial the interest rate down a little bit, at least 0.5% from what the average allows us to. I always use the fixed loans, not the participating loans, because it illustrates a lot less income. And we'll get to that in a second. So, but again, I'll keep back the story. So John, your $875,000 over 31 years, based on this hypothetical example, based on history though, would have turned itself into $2.7 million of money. That's your money. You could walk into my office, we could sign a few pieces of paper, we could send it into the company, and they'd send you a check for $2.8 million, $2.7 million. But John, the problem with that is if we do it that way, that's not the only thing you're going to get in the mail. Because the IRS is going to say, hey, congratulations, you made $1.9 million of profit, of gain, and we want our cut. And you would have to owe tax on $1.9 million. Well, John, clearly we've been talking about this being tax-free. So what I did is I asked the computer to solve for me how much you could take out each and every year tax-free all the way to age 100. Now, stepping out of role, you can see I don't get into details yet. I will at the end. I keep it story level. I don't really explain how and why the computer could solve this. That all comes after we have this conversation. And again, if you used a participating loan, it would show $271,000. But folks, the stake already has so much sizzle, it doesn't need to get more powerful. So be conservative, because this is a number they're going to remember. So say, John, I asked the computer, stepping back into role, how much you could take out each and every year all the way to age 100, income tax-free. And it says you could take out a little bit more than $200,000 a year. Well, John, think about this. If you took out $200,000 a year in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you would have taken out $1 million, which is $125,000 more than you put in. You would take out $125,000 more than you put in out in 5 years. It took you 31 years to put it in, but you get to take it out in 5 plus an extra 125. And how much do you have still in your cash value? Well, if you add that extra 125,000, you have more than you had when you started. Well, John, now let's look at age 85. And the reason I go to age 85 is because it's a realistic life expectancy. And so, John, again, you haven't put in more money. So the total you put in was $875,000. But if you put in, or if you took out a little over $200,000 for that 19-year period, you would have taken out $3.8 million in tax-free income during that 19-year period. But if you die at age 85, your beneficiaries would still receive $2.4 million in income tax-free death benefit. Then you add those two numbers together, which in this case is 6.2, and say, John, so your $875,000 of contribution over 31 years turned itself into $6.2 million of tax-free benefit to both you and your beneficiaries. What do you think? And folks, that's the first soft closes. What do you think? They'll be amazed, they'll explain, and then I on a different webinar, which I'm going to make available to you guys if you want to, I get into the details of the training of how do you walk them through their disbelief. So you can bring them back to those two boxes and say, now, John, so the real question is, how much do you want to put in? How much do you want to put in between those two boxes? But that's the power of our product. And here's what I want you to see, folks. Sometimes individuals, financial planners who don't really deal in life insurance will say to their clients, oh, you don't want life insurance because of the cost, because you can accumulate a lot more money outside of it. And I think you'll see here by this graph. Now, this is not a software piece. This is numbers from an Excel spreadsheet that I manually created. So there's no program that created this. Just wanted to, because I had people ask me for this before. But the numbers are accurate and the numbers are real. This is for your illustration to show the power. Now, the reality is you may not accumulate more outside of a life insurance product because you have the risk of loss. But let's look at the numbers. This is the power of this particular product at 6.5%. Because of the bonus structure of this product, again, annual contribution of 28.2, 31 years accumulation at 6.5%, grows to 2.7 million. Even with insurance cost, folks, even with all fees and expenses, because of the bonus, internal rate of return of that product over 31 years is 6.77%. It's 0.27% better than even what we illustrated. And they're able to get out $200,000 a year, zero tax on withdrawal. Net distribution is $200,447. Remember, it's not what you accumulate that matters. It's what you distribute that counts. Let's look. If they put into a tax qualified plan, same amount of money at 6.5%, actually it wouldn't even accumulate as much, right? Because the internal rate of return was 6.5%, even if, with no taxation. They could take out, based on 6.5% ongoing return for 34 years, they would have enough to distribute $193,000 a year every year, but that's before taxes. If tax rates stay roughly the same at 50% and don't even go up, then they would only take out $96,000 in net distribution, less than half of what the life insurance. So someone might say, well, yeah, but you could put more into a tax qualified plan because you have tax savings. Okay, let's bump it up by 20%. Put in $33,000. And you could grow it to 3.1 million. Yes, that's higher. It's a higher accumulation value. You could take out 232,000. Yes, that's higher, but after 50% federal and state tax. And again, that's where things are today at the top bracket, roughly, a little less than that, but not where they could go. It's still almost half. Folks, they'd have to put in $58,000 a year at 6.5%, accumulate $5.4 million, distribute $400,000 a year to equal what we do in our humble, wonderful product. Please remember, it's not what you accumulate that matters. It's what you distribute that counts. Now, I'm going to breeze through this just in view of time because Joel did a tremendous job. His story tells my story. And he talked about a net. So I'm going to not take your time any longer. But in my early career, the way I was taught is probably the way you're taught, is you just had to talk to a lot of individuals. It's a funnel. You put 100 people you talk to 100 people, you'll get 10 of them in the funnel, and about 2 or 3 will come through. But all of that changed on an experience I had years ago when I was out fishing with a fishing pole during a year that I was working harder than I'd ever worked and had less to show for it. And the short end of this story is I realized that fishing with a pole is a terrible way to fish. What instead I needed to figure, literal fishing, but I applied that to my business, that the way I'd been doing things, meeting with each individual person to determine if they were a candidate, if they needed what I had to offer, if they wanted what I had to offer. And 6, 7 out of 10 didn't. So I was wasting my time, their time and my time, meeting with those 6 or 7 people that really weren't a good fit. I thought, what if I could only meet with the people who needed and wanted what I had to offer? And that would be fishing with a net, like Joel indicated, not just any net, but a net that's the perfect net that lets all the little fish that weren't going to buy swim through, all the big fish that it's not a fit for don't fit, but just the right fish, the one that has a need and want. And folks, that's what I've done for you, the power of leverage. And I'm going to give you some marketing tips here as we come to a close before I give you the promo code. But my books were written to be read by the consumer, but they were written to be your net. They were the opportunity for you not to have to meet with 10 people to have 3 or 4 quality conversations. They're allowing you to talk, like Joel mentioned, to those who are interested. They're calling you saying, wow, I read this. Or the lady who saw the book sitting there and picked it up. Joel would have never had the opportunity to speak with her. And now he's talking about a $500,000 case simply because the net was there waiting to do the work for you so that you could have a quality conversation and find those that needed and wanted what you had and help them in that way. And I'm telling you, it will double, triple, or far more your first appointment success because you're talking to and meeting with people who are already interested. You're not having to spend time with them to figure out if they are interested. So you've heard Joel's story. One other story, and I'll be very brief. An individual who went to my full day workshop years ago, all he did in his existing, and these were verified numbers by me, in his existing sphere of influence was hand out 100 books over the course of 12 months. And in that 12 months, this is a guy who was an annuity producer. He'd never written life insurance, more than $20,000 total accumulated in his life, and most of it term. All he did is hand out tax-free retirement to folks he golfed with, folks he coached with, and he did $720,000 in target life premium in 12 months. Joel's story, before he shared it, I was going to share it, but we don't need to today. So this, you may be familiar if you've read it. This is the new version, the updated 10th anniversary version of Tax-Free Retirement. It shows the story of what I shared with you today, plus a lot else. It is intended to make the horse thirsty. So those that are interested will come back to you and say, tell me more. And like in Joel's case, $230,000 in 3 months of commissions in about a dozen cases. Pretty powerful. Here are 4 other books that you can utilize. Stress-Free Retirement is intended for the annuity, index annuity space. Retirement Miracle, that I know many of you have read and purchased, is really not a product book. Tax-free retirement's for the IUL, stress-free retirement's for the indexed annuity. Retirement Miracle is like a combined. It's a very different story. It's a story and the power of the indexed strategy, how companies are able to do such a thing. Let us participate in market growth, but not punish us for when the market goes down. And then Life Insurance Dilemma is a new one you might not be familiar with. That is my term conversion conversation in a little book form. These last 2 are short little books. The other 2 are full-length books. They're about 35, 40 pages each, 5, 6 chapters, but very direct reads that are having great results. And then the 5 retirement myths are exactly that. I dispel 5 retirement myths, and that is pointed more towards annuities. So one agent has described, I just wanted to share this because it's just another agent's perspective that I like. He said, Patrick, my books are like being able to hire an employee and place them inside my clients' homes, an employee who never requires a salary. And I guess Joel kind of supported that based on mentioning someone picking up the book on a coffee table. I've had agents tell me they've made sales from a book that was left. They gave it to somebody, they had their name included inside of it, and it was left on an airplane. I had someone say, and that person picked it up on an airplane and then called the agent whose name was in it. I've had policies sold by agents whose books were left in taxi cabs. So again, it's simply a net to get you in front of people who are interested. So how can you use the books right now? Here's 2 ways. One is like Joel, you can, and by the way, he mentioned, I helped him craft some letters. Those letters are available to you if you want them. There's a program called Simplicity Connect. And at the end, I'll give you an information of where you can email if you want to find out about how to get those letters. But those letters that we crafted for Joel, so we know they work, you have the testimony there, are available to agents if they want them to be able to do this. But in short, what you can simply do is, agents who you've talked to in the past, who've had connection with in the past, but haven't bought anything, well, this is kind of the second. You first reach out to current clients, ones that have bought stuff. Again, they are actually, I think, they want to be your little missionaries, if you will, because it makes them look smart in the midst of this, especially when markets are so volatile, to say they have a place where they don't have to worry about it. And so one is to reach back out to them. You can send a book, say, hey, just want to remind you what we've done here and what a great decision you've made. Maybe send them 2 books. Say, I've also included one for you to hand out to maybe a friend or family member so that they can participate in what you are participating with. And again, as far as cost, FedEx is pretty powerful. If you want to maybe take your top 10 or 20 clients, and again, you could also do this like Joel did to people who he spoke to, but they weren't current clients. So you have a lot of people there that you potentially could reach out to. But if you want to take those high propensity, higher income people and spend $17.50, at least in our area, for a FedEx and put a book or two in there with a little note, you can do a 2-day FedEx for about $17.50. It doesn't have to be overnight, but the power of a FedEx envelope, it gets things read because people feel like, wow, they spent the money to do that. This must be important. But also priority mail works great too. People see that as pretty significant, but it's pretty cheap, folks. With the cost of a book and a cost of a priority mail envelope, you can market very inexpensively and get the word out. Now, here's another thing that normally I save for my second webinar, the more in-depth webinar, but I want to share it with you today so you can see the power of how the book changes the marketing. You could ask this question right now to anybody, and I'll show you the difference of how it would play if you had something to give them versus if you didn't. So, and again, this is focusing on a small business owner, and you might say, hey, John, if there was a way as a business owner that you could put money away for the future, say retirement, that would do 3 things. That would grow tax-free, that you could access tax-free, and maybe best of all, as a small business owner, has no contribution requirement for your employees. What would you think about that? Well, most would say, yeah, that would be too good to be true. And here's how you can reply. You could reply this way. Well, if you didn't have something to give them, how would you reply? Well, you'd have to say something like, if they say, sure, that'd be great. Or, you'd say, or if they said that too good to be true, well, actually, John, no, that's a way you can do that. I'd love to share it with you. Could we get together so I can? Folks, you have to go into sort of a sales mode. You're setting an appointment. They feel set up. They feel like you were marketing to them. And if it's a friend or family member, that can be awkward. And so why the book makes this powerful is you can say this instead. So if it's a business owner, he says, man, I'd love that, or that's too good to be true. Say, the reason I asked, John, is I just read a great book that describes as a business owner how you can do that. And when I was reading it, I thought about you and I bought you a copy. I'm going to give it to you, but I have one favor to ask. Would you be willing to read just one short chapter? It's only about 6 pages long because I'd love to get your thoughts. See how that changes it? You're not, matter of fact, here are the 3 things you've done. Instead of they feel marketed to or, prospected to, here's what you've told them. You've told them you're thinking about them, you bought them a gift, and you want their opinion. And those 3 things change everything about prospecting because there's no longer prospecting. You hand the book out as a gift and you let the people come to you who have a want and a need, who feel thirsty, who need a drink after they have read it. So a couple of key points when you give it away. Don't just say, here's a great book. I think you'll love it. It doesn't. I mean, it works. Obviously, a book on a coffee table works. A book in a taxi or a plane has worked, but it's not the most effective. What you want to do is, now you want them to read the whole book, but the way you often get them to read the whole book is simply to ask them to read one chapter. Simply say something like, hey, it could be, there are many chapters in there you can point to. That one example was just for one business owner, just for a business owner, but it could be many other people. And you could say, hey, would you be willing to read this, just one chapter? In this case, actually, the first chapter is a good one to point to in stress-free or tax-free retirement. But again, put something permanent, sticker on the back saying compliments of or whatever, because that book might get passed around or found somewhere and you want them to come back to you. So we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to give you the promo code, but here I want you to know, for those that want to go a little deeper, here's what I'm doing this year. And it's been tremendously successful. What you were on today was what I call the Tax-Free Retirement 101. It was really the introduction. There's a TFR 201. The next one's on August 4th. It's a 3-hour training where we take the presentation itself, those few slides, just those, the presentation, and I go through it and train you on, here's what you say, here's how you say it, here's everything. Here's how you build the illustration, here's how you explain the illustration, here's why the 0, the guaranteed column on the illustration, is your best friend. Now, there's 2 ways that you can be involved in that you can participate in that. One is because I'm doing this with Simplicity Life. If you're contracted with Simplicity Life and hold an active Allianz, Pacific Life, or F&G contract, then you can do that for free. Matter of fact, I'll tell you in a minute, you might even be paid if you want to do that, but that is, it's a possibility. Or you don't have to do that if you're somewhere out, or with some other organization, that's fine. But the other way is to purchase what I call the Insiders Package. And then the Insiders Package also includes what I'm doing that has been really fun, a new monthly training each and every month for this group of insiders. And we have a couple hundred who are part of that right now. And I'll tell you the couple that I've done so far and what's coming here in the future. But here's what you get as an insider on the Insiders Package. For less than the price of 100 books, for $897, you're going to receive 100 books, which normally the retail is $997. You're going to get my full 4-hour workshop training video on a memory stick, normally $399. You're going to get a PowerPoint that I talked about, similar to what I gave to you today, but designed for consumers to be used either one-on-one or in group settings that you can train. You don't have to memorize everything that I've said. I give it to you and you just explain these simple PowerPoint slides in common language and introduce to them this concept, and then leave them with the option of what's best for them, and then give them the opportunity through, a book potentially to like if you're in a group setting. So you get that PowerPoint, you get the monthly training. It's a 12-month monthly training. You'll also get a promo code to be able to buy all of my books in any quantity at $695 forever going forward. But here's my favorite part. If you invest $900, I guarantee that you will make a 4,000% profit in the next 12 months. Now, here's my guarantee. If you simply hand out those 100 books, now 4,000% profit is 36,000. Joel made 230,000, so I feel pretty safe. If you hand those books out in any form you want, over the next 12 months, don't make at least 36,000 in new commissions, I will send you another 100 books for free, no questions asked. So that's the Insiders Package. If you want to go on to the next level training, the 201, as well as the monthly training, that package is how you'd want to do that. So, but let's say you don't. If you just want a few books, I promised you a promo code. Here it is. You can use this for the foreseeable future. My price on my books is right here. 1 through 10 is $15.97 each. You have to buy 100 or more to get them at $9.97. With this promo code, just simply the promo code right here, 897, you can get all books in any quantity at $8.97 each. And just simply go to taxfreebook.com. Taxfreebook.com, put in the quantities you want, put in the promo code 897, and you'll get those books cheaper than you can get anywhere else for as long as you want to get them. If you want the Insiders Package, a couple ways. One, you can click here at taxfreebook.com. You can click here and go to learn more, or you can just go right to TFR Insiders. TFR Insiders, it talks about the things. It doesn't mention the $695, but I promise you it's there. We'll add that, and you'll get a promo code. That promo code will change, so it's really exclusively for you guys. All you have to do is type in a quantity of books that total 100. No promo code is needed. Type in a book that total 100 and click order now. And so again, if you want to be a part of any of those future trainings, or even if you don't, whether you do or not, if you just want to make your life much easier and not have to meet with 10 people to sell 2 policies, if you want to meet with 2 people to sell 2 policies and let my books be your net, that is, again, taxfreebook.com to order the books, tfrinsiders.com to be a part of the Insiders. And here's my upcoming Insiders training. Actually, let me bring my pointer back up. On May 14th, I did using stress-free retirement to market indexed annuities. That's saved in the training library. By the way, as an insider, you'll have all of my training library accessible to you anytime. That's on June 11th, I did the term conversion program. Very, very fun one. Great response from the agents that participated. Coming up on this Thursday, so just in 2 days, my next training is going to be senior market life insurance. I have 4 or 5 strategies of how to talk to the senior market for life insurance policies. And there's some really significant ways that we can benefit the senior market, those that are in or nearing retirement, with life insurance, not just annuities. So here's the contact information I promised. If you want to, again, if you buy the TFR Insiders package, you're automatically included. You'll get an email to join us for the August 4th 3-hour training, and you'll get an invitation every month. Actually, you'll get an invitation for the 301, the senior market life insurance in 2 days. So all you have to do is buy the Insiders package and you're automatically included. If you don't buy the Insiders package but want to do it because you're already with Simplicity or want to be a part of Simplicity, if you are contracted with one of those primary carriers, you're invited not to the 301, but to the 201, the 3-hour training. And when you email tax-free retirement at simplicitygroup.com, you ask if you can receive a $200 just to attend the 201 class. So I'm going to leave you with that. I told you it was going to be about an hour and 10 minutes. We went a little over. I gave you a little bit more today than I often do. And also Joel's time, I didn't want to short that because that was so significant. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be part of this webinar. Thank you for your trust and many of you have been clients for years of tax-free retirement. And I want to just extend my sincere appreciation. And I look forward to working with many of you going forward and helping you guys have the same kind of success in the coming quarters that Joel has had in these last 3 months. So again, thank you. There's information if you want to reach out. Look forward to connecting with many of you going forward. Have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week.